During World War II, long before the German High Command ever faced American troops on the battlefield, they mocked the United States' younger generation relentlessly. Nazi propaganda painted America's youth as soft, lazy, spoiled boys raised on comfort and movies, children who couldn't possibly stand against hardened German warriors. Generals in Berlin would scoff that American soldiers would break within days of real combat, that the U.S. was a nation of weak students, factory boys, and city kids who had never known discipline. But the moment these same German generals were captured and marched into American-run prison camps, their arrogance evaporated. Standing at the gates were the men they had mocked, the American farm boys, quiet, broad-shouldered giants who looked nothing like the propaganda posters. These soldiers weren't built in gyms, they were shaped by years of dawn-to-dusk labor, throwing hay bales, plowing fields, lifting equipment, wrestling livestock, and surviving brutal winters. Their hands were rough like sandpaper, their posture straight as iron, and their strength came not from training, but from life itself. German generals stared in disbelief as these young Americans, many only 18 or 19 years old, effortlessly unloaded trucks, carried heavy beams over their shoulders, and moved crates so massive that it took 3 German soldiers to lift the same weight. One general whispered to another, "These are not boys, these are bulls." In the camps, the prisoners watched American farm boys handle every task with effortless confidence, fixing engines, repairing fences, organizing supply lines, cooking meals, even calming frightened horses that had been transported for military use. Their skill sets were endless, practical, and intuitive, the product of rural life where every child grew up learning to work with their hands. And their discipline shocked the Germans even more. These young Americans didn't brag, didn't threaten, didn't show cruelty. They followed orders precisely, treated POWs according to the rules, and maintained a calm authority that made German officers realize how deeply they had underestimated the United States. One Wehrmacht general later wrote in his diary that America's strength was not in her weapons, but in her sons from the farms, raised in the open air, fed with strong food, and trained by nature to endure anything. Another recalled the moment he saw 2 American farm boys repair a broken gate by cutting wood, reshaping metal, and rebuilding the hinge in minutes, a job that would have taken trained German engineers an hour. The German generals began to understand why American units had advanced so fast across Europe. These were not weak city boys, they were young men who had grown up waking at sunrise, working until their muscles burned, and never complaining. Their stamina seemed endless, their bodies unshakable, their spirits unbroken. And perhaps the greatest shock of all was their kindness. These powerful young soldiers shared food, gave blankets to shivering POWs, and treated wounded Germans with the same care as their own. The generals realized that the very generation they had mocked was the one that had crushed the Nazi war machine. American farm boys, humble, strong, disciplined, and quietly confident, were the backbone of an army the Germans were never prepared to face. And as the generals sat in silence watching these young men move with effortless strength, they understood a truth they had ignored for years. America's youth were never weak, because the fields, farms, and open land of the United States had raised a generation of warriors.